Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar and for your time. My name is Bashar Fakri, and I'm the Student Employment Associate for the Center for Career Services, accompanied by our career coaches, Dennis Weeks, Kari Scott, and Cole Godden, to provide an overview of on-campus employment, resume, cover letter guides, and interview strategies, as well as best practices and following up. Before we begin today, I would like to go over a couple of logistical items. I'll be taking questions at the end of the presentation using the Q&A feature. Please reserve all questions towards the end of the presentation for them to get answered. We will also be recording the summer webinars, and they'll be available on our YouTube account shortly after this webinar is posted. We will also send them out via email to all students. If you have any questions, please feel free to let us know. All right, so we have engage with alumni. We have filling a form, which was not very helpful. That's understandable. And look at the job description, yes. And yes, the presentation is being recorded. Practice interview with a colleague or friend. When making a resume, make it concise and look professional. Ask for payment from someone inside of the company for reference, okay. Building a LinkedIn profile, yes, very important for networking. Tailor your resume for each job application separately, yes, that's great. Received advice regarding recommendation about keeping points apart from academia to what's in your resume, not lying on your resume, adjusting the cover letter according to the job posting perfectly, perfect. Cool, so we definitely have a couple of answers in terms of filling out your applications, your resume guides, as well as your references primarily. So I will go ahead and pass it over to talk about the aspects of US work culture.
Yes, thank you for that, Bashar.
Of course.
Good morning, everyone. So thank you all for being here. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the aspects of US work culture. So typically in US work culture, it is a little less hierarchical. And so what we mean by that is typically you may be able to have open conversations with your boss, as well as maybe your boss's boss and other colleagues. Because it is such like because teamwork is constantly encouraged, as well as there's a focus on individual achievements, innovation, and merit-based advancement. And as of today, there are many workplaces that are striving to create more diverse and inclusive environments. So you can see that there's a lot of focus on making sure that there is diversity in perspectives. And we also wanted to mention that oftentimes in US work culture that there are office celebrations. Now, typically, a lot of times these are optional, but so they may be called like Fun Fridays or just different coffee breaks that you may be able to engage with other colleagues and maybe your boss. This is not typically required, but we do encourage you to do this because, again, it builds that team collaboration and is really important just to make sure you have people in your industry that you can kind of rely on moving forward. And then for communication within the US work culture, typically direct and open communication is favored. So small talk is not necessarily small talk is typically encouraged, but in terms of whenever we're talking about like direct and open communication, you want to make sure that whatever point you are getting to, that it is concise and you're getting kind of to the point. And then in terms of dress attire for US work culture, typically business casual is more appropriate for daily office attire. We typically say dress your best for interviews, so probably go a little bit more formal for interviews, because the more that you dress your best, that can be a great, just very impressive to employers. And when you are, quote unquote, dressing your best, it's good to research what type of attire is the norm for that specific employer, because it gives you kind of a better sense of how other people in the office are kind of presenting themselves, and what may be kind of the standard dress attire in that specific work culture. And now some of the traditional challenges that a lot of international students may face. So cultural transition. So typically, adapting to a new environment, new culture, just new way of life. That can be a challenge, as well as potential language barriers, homesickness. There's also accommodation expectations, and I guess, kind of going off of this is essentially accommodation expectations, meaning that there may be, just a different way of like different living situations in the US versus your home country. And then there may be different learning styles too, that may be a challenge, as well as academic expectations, limited financial opportunities, as well as adapting to different time zones.
So, briefly going over a common question that we receive from a lot of international and domestic students is, what is work study, specifically the federal work study versus non-federal work study? So the Federal Work Study Program is a federally funded program that allows students who have received a federal work study offer from the Office of Student Financial Assistance as part of their federal aid, the opportunity to earn money through a position during the fall and spring semesters. If you've been offered and accepted a federal work study funding, that's great. It is part of your financial aid package. You are eligible to hold a federal work study position. However, just to emphasize, due to the FWS program being federally funded, FWS positions are only available to domestic students. And so that means international students are able to apply to non-federal work study positions in the employment portal specifically. For more information, you can go ahead and visit the student employment website, which we will have linked towards the end of the presentation, as well as is sent out in a follow-up email. To go over a few numbers, the students employed on campus, we have about 19% of international students, which is a larger percentage than the overall body of international students that we have on campus. So we do employ more international students per average than the entire international student population on campus, as well as 81% for US citizens and permanent residents. When we look at the work study position, the non-federal work study numbers, we have 87% of on-campus jobs that are non-federal work study, 1% which is off-campus work study, and 12% that is work study. However, do keep in mind that our non-federal work study positions are positions that can also be held in addition to federal work study positions. So typically the competition for non-federal work study positions is greater in that aspect. And now I'll go ahead and hand it over to Kari to talk more about resumes.
Okay, so one of the things that a lot of international students find is that resumes are different in the US than they are in other places. So in general, we recommend that you have just a one-page resume that is targeted around just what's important for that job. So you don't need to tell us everything you've ever done in your work life. Basically, you just want to list the experience that shows that you can do the job that you are applying for. And this is really important, especially if you're a grad student and you've done a lot of really high level things. A lot of times employers look at that and they think, oh, they're overqualified, I don't want to hire them. So you really just want to put on your resume those things that are relevant to the position that you are seeking, and then keep it to one page. Another big difference in the US is that we keep personal information off of resumes. And that's because there's been a history in the past of a lot of employment discrimination based on ethnic or color or other things. And so it's now typical to keep that stuff off of your resume because that helps avoid that sort of thing. So you don't put your age, your marital status, your gender. You definitely don't put a photograph on a US resume. That is potential bias thing. And not necessarily at GW, but when you are applying for OPT, CPT, other employment off of the campus, a lot of employers will reject a resume out of hand if there's a photo on it. So you definitely want to make sure that you keep that kind of stuff off. You also want to focus on results. So you can say that you manage social media someplace, but it's better if you say that you manage social media, increasing engagement by 50% or something like that. You want to use action verbs and metrics to show that you know how to do these things. This is a trend that's been going on in the US. We don't use objective statements anymore. This was something that was really popular many years ago, before computers, actually, when your resume was pretty much fixed. You couldn't edit it very easily because it was typed on a typewriter. And so people put objective statements to keep their resume, so that an employer knew what the resume is. Now that we have computers and you can edit your resume very easily and send a very tailored resume to the employer, we don't use those. Some people do include a summary of their skills that are needed for that particular job at the top of the resume. This can be helpful. Some employers love them, some employers hate them. If you want to put one on, it's fine. We typically don't encourage it, but some people still like to use it. And then you also want to show your resume in reverse chronological order. So typically for students, we suggest that your education be at the top of your resume, and then your experience, and then maybe, you know, some skills. A lot of employers like to see what languages you speak. Many international students are polyglots. You speak a lot of languages. Employers really like to see that, but just make sure that everything is listed in the last thing that you did first. So the first thing on your resume at this point when you're applying at GW would be your GW education, and then you go backwards. Same with your experience. It's the last job that you held, and then the job before that, and then the job before that. You can go next slide. And one of the things we're going to be talking about is Handshake. Handshake is a program that's used on many college campuses, very popular. It's sort of, for those of you who are familiar with contact management, like Salesforce or something like that, Handshake is sort of our version of it. It's typically set up just for college students. You have a little profile. Employers can see your profile. So you want to, when you first get onto Handshake, you'll get a bunch of questions, and you'll see that the more questions you answer, the more personalized your profile is. So if an employer is looking for a specific skill, they can search in Handshake to find a student with that particular skill. There are other things on there. So you'll see that there is a list of jobs. There is a list of events. So if you want to learn more throughout your time at GW about getting employment in the US, you'll see that we have workshops. We have workshops to help you write your resume. We have workshops to help you network with others. We have lots of workshops. We have career fairs throughout the year. So there are a lot of events. You can actually look up some information about a specific employer. And then I've circled this here on the little graphic, the Career Center. There are lots of resources at the Career Center. So if you click on that little link that says Career Center, you'll see that's where you make an appointment with a career coach to talk with one of us. It just says make an appointment. And then there's another link there that says resources. And there's a whole library of things. So there's a resume guide, there's a cover letter guide, there's all kinds of information there that will help you throughout your time at GW to help you find jobs, maybe do your CPT, OPT. You may not see Handshake just yet, but it is linked on the student career page, which you'll get a link to at the end of this, I think, that will help you find it. And then as soon as we've added all the fall incoming students to Handshake, we'll open it up and you'll be able to get into that probably within the next 2 weeks. Okay, next slide.
Well, good day, and thank you for joining us. You just heard Coach Kari talk about the importance of a good resume. And in addition to a good resume, it is extremely important that it is coupled with a good cover letter, because those two things together will lead you to an interview more often than not. And the interview is what you're really looking for. So there are primary elements of a good cover letter, and they include the fact that a good cover letter is a single page. And a short introductory paragraph is your paragraph number 1. And it is really not a paragraph for you to talk about dreams that you've always had about doing a certain kind of work, etc. It is an introductory paragraph that includes a specific reference to the position title and the entity that is hiring for that position, along with your name and your status at GW, and maybe a second sentence that describes how you are specifically relevant with your background to that position. An experiences paragraph, which for me is paragraph 2, and by the way, you will find that among us coaches and even among coaches globally, we all have different attitudes about what a good cover letter is. And so what you're hearing here is my attitude about a cover letter, and you might find from others of us coaches at the Career Center different attitudes, but I will continue with mine, and then you will, as you get here and start applying, decide which one works best for you. So after the introductory paragraph, it is proposed that you write a paragraph that speaks to your experiences using the language found in the position description, where you find a list of or a paragraph discussing the roles and responsibilities and tasks that you will be expected to undertake if you are selected for that position. And so you would show how you have already done 1 or 2 or 3 of those tasks to show your experience, and you have indicated, or you will indicate in your cover letter, how that relevancy of your experience is directly appropriate for the position that you are applying for. Then there is another paragraph, which for me is called the skills and quals paragraph. And that paragraph also uses language from the position description in this section where they indicate that the minimum requirements for this position are, and they will list them, and the preferred requirements for this position are. You will write your paragraph about skills and qualifications using some of the language in that position description where they list the skills and quals that are required. And then, as the first paragraph is relatively short, the fourth paragraph is also relatively short, and it is a simple cell. It is a close, which reaffirms what a great candidate you are for the specific position at the specific hiring entity, and that you look forward to having a conversation to discuss how you can bring your background to that position. And that is where you are actually asking for an interview. That is the close. It's a short paragraph. And if you follow these steps or close to these steps on a one-page cover letter, it will improve your opportunity to get the interview.
Right. Thank you, Dennis, for that. So now that Kari and Dennis have outlined the resume and cover letter portion, once you've nailed that, the interview process is something, the US interview process is something a bit unique. Once you get to the interview process, typically the structure and format, there is a multi-stage process typically. So if you are applying to on-campus positions, you may have to go in for a first or maybe a second round interview. And this can include phone screenings, video interviews, and in-person interviews. Typically behavioral interviews are common. And so what we mean by this is basically having to bring up some of your previous experiences that you've had to kind of talk about how that, or at least like relate to the employer, how this will impact your future performance. And a lot of times competency-based questions are frequently used. So what we mean by like competency-based questions is just kind of measuring a certain skill set. So it may be a question of how do you respond in stressful situations, because they may want to see like what is your level of adaptability. And then whenever it comes to punctuality, we want to mention that especially for US interview process, that being on time is crucial and lateness is seen as unprofessional. So it is really critical to make sure that you are present for the time that is specifically allotted to you. And again, Kari had mentioned this earlier, but in terms of personal questions, typically those type of personal topics relating to age, marital status, religion, those are typically off limits, so you don't have to worry about answering those type of questions in the interview process. And the last portion that we do want to mention that is unique to the US interview process is that it's typically almost kind of viewed as self-promotional and maybe even boastful in some ways. So typically when you're in the interview, you're expected to express confidently and concisely your specific achievements and your strengths. And so trying to emphasize that you are a good fit and bringing up some of those companies' missions and work values and how, again, your specific skill set, your experiences, the traits about you kind of align with some of this company's values. And during the interview, eye contact is very important. So that way you can appear confident as you are conducting or going throughout the interview process. Now, excuse me. So for the interview process, it does require a bit of prep work. So typically what we suggest is before the interview, you want to make sure that you research the mission and vision of the company or organization. So some examples are looking at the direct employer's website, as well as like different LinkedIn posts, Glassdoor.com, newspapers, industry journals. You want to make sure that you can communicate that you have really invested time in understanding their mission and that you are wholeheartedly committed to committing to that specific mission of the organization. And step 2, we say meet with a career coach. So at the Career Center, we are able to help you with like interview prep. So a lot of times students will come in for mock interviews and maybe just help like discussing like different interview prep strategies. So the career coaches are here to help you with that process. So make sure to make that appointment before you have that interview so you can, and it's always good to just practice with someone, especially someone who's, an expert with this kind of thing. And now during the interview, typically you are going to get the first question oftentimes is going to be, tell us about yourself. And this is kind of when you come in with your elevator pitch, when you're talking about some of the previous experiences that you've had and how that is relating to why specifically you're wanting to apply to this position at this organization. And some of the types of questions that may be asked during the U.S. interview process. So they can be categorized in 3 different types of questions. So there are like standard interview questions, strengths-based questions, and behavioral interview questions. And so as you can see on here, there are different examples for each if you want to read those. And if there's anything that I think this is probably the most important part whenever we are talking about the carrying yourself throughout the interview process, utilizing the SOAR method. And so the SOAR method, we will go ahead and describe in our next slide, but I want to make sure that I highlight how important that is. But making sure that even after the interview, you do ask about 3 to 4 questions at the end of the interview, because oftentimes at the end of the interview, the hiring manager may ask, do you have any questions for us? And typically that is a great way to, one, find out more about the organization, but also, again, re-emphasize just how interested you are in learning more about them. So, as I mentioned with the SOAR method, I think this is probably one of the most important things if you take anything away from this webinar today. So it stands for situation, obstacle, action, and result. And so with the SOAR method, this is typically a method that is used to answer more of the behavioral type questions, as we discussed in the last slide. And so whenever we talk about these behavioral type questions, these are questions such as, tell us about a time where you experienced something. So it may be, tell us about a time where you encountered a challenge. And so when you are answering that type of question, you typically want to pick apart the situation and provide some specific information that allows the listener to understand the context. The who, what, when, and where is really important whenever you are telling that story and being specific with picking apart that situation from, it may be like a work experience or maybe an experience with a student organization you were in. Making sure to be as detailed with that is really important. Then you want to talk about the obstacle that you were presented with at hand. So you would make sure to outline the challenge, dilemma, or obstacle you had to overcome in that specific situation that you picked apart. Then the action component, you want to be specific in which specific steps did you take to address the challenge and the obstacle. And when you are outlining this specific piece of your response, it is really important to showcase to them what is your approach, because everyone has a very unique approach to problem solving and addressing certain situations. But what specific things did you do that makes your approach unique and just can maybe set you apart from others? And when you're talking, kind of closing off that response, you want to make sure to emphasize the result of that. And always make sure that it is a positive result. You want to outline what were the concrete outcomes of those actions, because essentially what you're trying to relay is you took action on this specific obstacle, which led in a positive result. And if you're able to showcase this with quantifiable and qualitative results, that is a great way to show how your actions had an impact. So providing some sort of numerical or like data value where you say like, oh, because I did this, it resulted in a percentage increase in this. That's going to be really important to show that evidence. And then I know that this is kind of lengthy.
Sorry, Cole, just 1 second. To everyone that is submitting Q&A questions, as mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, we'll be answering them at the end. So I do know that we're kind of getting a lot on our Q&A right now, so please just wait towards the end of the presentation for us to answer them all. Thank you. Go ahead, Cole.
Thanks, Bashar. I'll just go ahead and read this one on the left side, but as mentioned earlier, we're going to be posting this video, so you guys definitely go back and look back at these examples. Here's one situation that had happened. So this summer, I was a social media intern at company ABC, managing content for Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. In my second week, the director of marketing wanted to add TikTok to our strategy and asked for volunteers, so I stepped up. Now, the obstacle portion, despite my enthusiasm, I had never used TikTok before and didn't know what made campaigns successful on the platform. Then, outlining the action, with a meeting scheduled in 2 days, I created a TikTok account, studied the platform, watched tutorials, consulted friends, and made my own videos. I also prepared questions and brainstormed ideas for the campaign. Notice how specific this person was in outlining, how they went about resolving this, and also took other people's perspectives into account to make sure that they were successful. Now, and then as a result, at the meeting, I shared insights on TikTok's functionality and demographic appeal and contributed to campaign ideas. Afterward, I helped create the company's account, compiled content, and monitored interactions. So again, relaying that message that because of the action that they took, they were able to be successful within the work environment. And so the last portion we want to talk about is obviously the after the interview part. So after the interview, you always want to make sure to send a thank you message within 24 hours and write down any sort of key points that you discussed in the interview to address them when writing a note, to show that you had some key takeaways from your conversation. As well as if this is applicable, because a lot of times with on-campus positions, this may not necessarily be applicable, but with positions outside of GW, this may be the case, but you would need to follow up with your references to alert them that they may receive outreach from the specific organization, since a lot of times hiring managers will reach out to professional and academic references that you have put down whenever you applied for the job. Now, don't be alarmed if you do not hear back from hiring managers. Oftentimes there may not be, the communication may not necessarily be back and forth as much, but something that just to keep in mind, after the interview process, it's good to at least just send the thank you note and then, just be patient on next steps.
Yeah, let me quickly jump in here, Cole. So, to follow up on that point, hiring managers receive hundreds of applications, sometimes with their postings. So, don't be alarmed if you don't hear back from a hiring manager. It is just simply that hiring managers do not have enough time in the day or the week to give a personalized response to each individual that sends them an email, whether that's a thank you email or if you were not selected for the position and wanting to learn more towards why you were not selected for the position, hiring managers simply just might not have enough time to respond to every inquiry. So this is why we are also emphasizing the key importance of our career coaches, because the feedback that you might not receive from hiring managers, you can sit down with a career coach to review your resume, your cover letter, as well as reflect on your interview process and see where you can improve and where you can refine your application material.
Great points. Thank you, Bashar.
And then we'll go to Dennis.
Okay, so let's now put this stuff all together and give you a step-by-step process for getting that job. And first, access to Handshake. There's Handshake again. Remember, Coach Kari had something to say about that, and you will have access to it pretty soon. So access to Handshake General and Policy Resume Guide, which you will find by logging onto Handshake, clicking on the Career Center, which is over on the left side, clicking on Resources when you reach the Career Center, and then typing in the word resume. And you will find several articles and different resume guides, depending on whether you're a STEM student, whether you're a generalist, a policy person, etc. There are multiple resume guides, and these guides show you about format and print and non-use of italics and the length of bullets and how to write them, etc. So using Handshake, and you can also use VMOC, as Coach Kari said a few minutes ago. There is a template there. You will write up your background in an appropriately formatted resume. Number two, upload that new and revised resume into VMOC, because VMOC is also an AI resume review mechanism, and it will come back to you with a score. And the score should be 75 or higher. It's not a grade, don't worry about it, but it is an indicator of work that you might need to do. And it will also give you some suggested edits that you will make in order to get that score to 75 or better. And you have 10 or more uploads available to be able to continue to improve that resume until it reaches 75 plus. Upload that final version into your Handshake documents profile. There is a section that takes documents, and only have your new, improved, perfect resume in that document section. Then you can review available GW positions. They will be made available. Bashar has told you or will tell you where to find those positions, and write the good cover letter, and have fun with this whole process, because it isn't the end of the world. You will need to be going through several of these processes in order to get the job you want. It's not the end of the world if you don't get the first job you try to get. Hang in there, have some fun with it.
Thank you, Dennis, for mentioning that. And just to put it into perspective, everyone, even for federal work study positions that are less competitive, we still recommend applicants to apply to at least 8 to 10 different positions. So for non-federal work study positions, I do know that we tend to have students that mass apply to positions. So they might apply to 50 plus postings. Do keep in mind that we do emphasize on tailoring your cover letter and your resume application material to each position because hiring managers do see when it is a copy and paste application and they do not move forward. 99% of the time, they do not move forward with an application they can tell was used in a mass applying method. So now to the fun part of where to find an actual job. So over here, once again, these slides will be made available and the presentation is recorded, so that will be available as well. But the direct link to access the student talent management system is right here. It is the gw-studentemployment.peopleadmin.com. This will take you to the main page where you will need to create an account on the left-hand bar side. On the third option, which is to create an account, you will have to use your email address, so your GW email address, and it is not the gwid@gwu.edu. It is the first portion of your email completely, as well as @gwu.edu. Please make sure not to use your @gwmail@gwu.edu. Once you've gone ahead and created an account, you'll be able to access the main profile to view the available positions. However, prior to doing so, I highly recommend clicking on the student user guide. The student user guide is an extensive document that is going to showcase to you all the resources you will need as an applicant to have the most successful approach in job searching. So that includes reviewing the resume, cover letter, and interview guides, where to find positions, specifically the student wage matrix, the position descriptions. We also have YouTube videos to visually walk through the process on how to access the system and where to search for those jobs. Once you're able to have access into the system and view the job postings, you'll be able to see here based on the categories. You have, for example, tier 2 positions, tier 3 positions, tier 1 positions. So you might find positions that have the same title. So like student research assistant, student communications, marketing specialist. However, it's just the departments use those same titles, but they are complete different positions. The different tiers, so you'll see there's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. That is based on experience as well as the demanding part of the job, how many tasks you're going to be completing, as well as an increase of pay. As of July 1st, every student employee starts at $17.50, beginning in the tier 1 position. You're also able to bookmark the positions if, for example, you really like the position description, but you feel as though your application material is not up to par. You can always bookmark it and have someone help you review your application material before going ahead and applying to it. Do keep in mind that due to the competitive nature of non-federal work study positions, some job postings might open and close the same day because they might have many applicants. However, we also emphasize to not mass apply to applications because at the end of the day, hiring managers we've received feedback from hiring managers, and they're well aware of when they can tell when a resume or an application in general is not tailored to their specific position. So just to tie in all together the workflow process, as we mentioned. So you do not have to go through Handshake, and you do not have to go through a career coach to begin applying for positions. As a matter of fact, you can go ahead into the system and start applying to positions today if you feel comfortable to do so. However, just to put into perspective the workflow. In order to set up your profile, you would need to do two things. You would create a Handshake profile. Keep in mind, new incoming students, they'll be available to create it in August. And you will also need to create your student applicant portal in the student employment portal as showcased in the past couple of slides. From there, you would gather your work experience, your extracurricular activities, your unique or efficient, as well as transferable skills. So as mentioned, you don't want to seem too overqualified at the end of the day. To have a PhD in a very niche field when applying to a tier 1 front desk staff position might make you seem very overqualified for the actual position. And from there on, you have two options. You can either make an appointment with a career coach, and from there on, you'll be able to review and edit your resume, your cover letter, your application material, going over the interview strategies, as well as your personalized career interests and goals. Because at the end of the day, our career coaches aren't just there to help you get a job, they're also there to help you navigate your 4+ years here at GW, whether that's your career goals, your interests, your academic views, as well as balancing your extracurricular and academic calendars if needed. From there on, you would review your strategic interview and follow-up practices with the career coaches, refining your resume and cover letter, and then you would apply. Or you can go ahead and bypass that process and apply to positions. However, I will say that typically students that go through our industry career coaches and our career coaches in general, we do see higher success rates post-graduation as well as within their job attainment here on campus. So just to put that into perspective. So we're nearing towards the end of the presentation. So just to make sure that everyone is well aware of the resources that are available to them for all job-related questions, for example, how to apply, where to apply, and etc., you are able to contact my team, the student employment team over at the GW for Center for Career Services. Our email is listed right here, gwsc@gwu.edu, as well as our phone number. And once you are able to have access to these slides, you'll also be able to see and click on this link to see the student employment resources. For all career development related questions, so to meet with career coaches, resumes, cover letters, networking strategies, and so forth, please contact the main GW Center for Career Services. So that is GW Career Center at gwu.edu as showcased in this slide, with our phone number and the website direct to career prep resources, as well as networking resources.